Buongiorno a tutti, vi chiedo di prendere posto.
Ladies and gentlemen,
Buongiorno a tutti di nuovo. Sono Lia Trogel e
my name is
vi do un benvenuto a questo evento in presenza dopo
to
così tanto tempo.
this event,
Siamo molto
finally
felici,
attended
molto
in
emozionati
person. We are so
di
very
vedervi qua.
happy
Siamo a
to
base
see you
Milano
all here.
e
We
voi del
are
pubblico
in Milan,
siete tutte persone che
and
rappresentano
people in the
idee,
audience are all
progetti,
people representing
imprese,
ideas,
start-up
projects,
che vogliono
startups
cambiare il modo in cui produciamo e consumiamo
that want to
qui
change
a
the
Milano.
way we consume in
Do il benvenuto
Milan.
anche a chi ci
I would like
segue
to welcome also
online, in
all of
diretta.
those who are following
Lo
us
vediamo come un
online.
evento ibrido
This
a
is
tutti gli
going to be
effetti.
what we call
E
an
dunque vi chiediamo
hybrid
di
event.
commentare, di scriverci
And therefore,
anche
do not
attraverso
hesitate
YouTube nei
to write in
commenti e
comments,
proveremo a dar
observations in
risposta
YouTube,
anche a voi.
and we will try to
È un
provide an
primo
answer
momento,
to you as
un primo
well.
passo
So this is
di
indeed the very
coprogettazione,
first
di qualcosa
step
di molto
of
particolare di
co-designing,
cui vi parleremo
something very
oggi.
unique and specific
Cosa
that
succederà
we will deep dive into
oggi?
in a moment. So what
Iniziamo
is
con
it
una
going to happen?
plenaria molto
We're
ricca.
going to have a very
Apriranno la
rich
plenaria
plenary
Zoe
session.
Romano e Annibale Delia
Zoe
che vi
Romano,
spiegheranno
Annibale
e vi
Delia,
introdurranno,
they will
lanceranno
introduce
il
and
progetto
also they
Centrino
will
qua a
launch
Milano.
the
E di
project
questo vi parleranno
Centrino
loro e
in
spiegheranno
Milan, but of
loro.
course they will be more
Avremo poi in
specific around it.
collegamento
We
Thomas
will
Diaz,
then hear
che
from
ci
Thomas
ispirerà
Diaz.
e ci
He will
spiegherà
inspire
qual è la
us, and
visione
meanwhile
Fab
he will
City.
tell us about
E
the
poi avremo il
vision
piacere
Fab
di
City,
dialogare con
and then
Cristina
we will be
Tajani e
pleased to
Ezio
speak
Manzini
with
sulle
Cristina
città
Tajani and
prossime.
Ezio Manzini around the
Finita la
future
plenaria,
of
inizierà
cities.
un momento di lavoro, di
So
tavoli di
as soon
lavoro,
as
di
the
tavoli di
plenary session is
coprogettazione con
over,
tutti
we
voi.
will sit around the
E
table
insieme
on
metteremo
co-design
il
round
primo
tables,
passo
and all
verso
together
la creazione
we will
del
be
Fab City
definitely
Hub.
creating the
Che cos'è il
so-called
Fab
Fab
City
City
Hub?
Hub.
E in
What is a
quale
Fab
progetto
City
si
Hub?
inserisce? Vi raccontano
And well, you'll
Annibale e
find
Zoe.
more by Annibale and Zoe.
È vero, è emozionante ritrovarsi di nuovo.
It is such a huge emotion to be in person, to be on site once again. So we've got a lot to do. So actually, I'd love to start right away with my presentation. Just bear with me for a second.
Ci siamo quasi.
So
Ci siamo. Questo è
So there we are. This is what we call a moment for co-design, and also we're launching Centrino, which is a kind of a funny name. It is an acronym, which means a number of things that you may check on the website if you want to. But we have decided to focus on the very result of this project in Milan. And this is indeed a digital space, but also physical space, maybe more than one spaces actually. So we have decided to fully focus on how being sustainable within a neighborhood. So hopefully I'm actually able to switch to the next slide. Just bear with me.
Va bene, non so se l'ho fatto io o l'ha fatto Costantino. Va bene. E abbiamo deciso di cominciare da
So we have decided to start from here. So the reason why we're spending this very hot afternoon in Milan speaking through these topics, well, this is because we're all sharing this vision that I will share with you over the next few minutes. So this is how it works between a city and industrial production. So we do import product usually from an area in the world farther away, and we do export waste to some other areas, very far away areas. And just to provide you with an overall understanding, well, we picked these two numbers. So $18,000 billion that is the value of worldwide trade, and 30 million of tons is the amount of waste that we have produced back in 2019. On the right-hand side of the slide, you may appreciate a chart that is simplifying the so-called linear model. So the reason why you're here today is because you replied to a survey. So we were wondering if here in Milan you're actually coping with circular production, specifically in design and fashion. Well, you should come and see us because we have something to talk about. So, of course, I'm pretty positive that this is not the model you're happy with. And why is that? Well, because things are not going quite right. Well, the debate around circular economy has been going on for a long time now. And but we actually picked a very recent picture to show you and to tell us also that things are not quite right. This is the Evergreen ship being stuck in the Suez Canal. And of course, considering losses, the economic losses that they have reported following this problem, well, following this, of course, there's a debate that we have to focus on. Well, you know what? We are absolutely convinced that there are no sustainable future in cities unless we rethink the where and the what we manufacture things. And I'm happy to say that and emphasize that because, of course, we're all becoming more and more sensitive towards sustainability. But when we consider sustainability, we never consider manufacturing. We usually consider mobility, and that makes sense. We do consider the green side of that, and that's okay as well. Whereas now we're very much focusing on a brand new essential concept. So the where and the what we manufacture, we do produce things. So there's a small piece of good news, actually, because there is an optional vision to the one that I've showed, and this is indeed the one we agreed upon, and this comes from a global initiative which is called Fab City. The founder, Thomas Diaz, he will introduce it in his remote speech in a moment, and so such vision comes from a fairly simple concept but truly revolutionary. So let's try to consider what happens if we change perspective and actually we have data moving as opposed to goods and items. Well, it sounds very easy. Of course, to execute it is way more complex. But if we've summarized the 3 bullet points here on the left-hand side. So the first bullet point says, well, first of all, we need to support and we need to feed this dynamics, this profound change in approaching manufacturing, trying to bring manufacturing back to cities. And this is something that Milan has been doing for a while. So we're very much used to this idea that manufacturing was for outskirts, for the outer neighborhood, somewhere else in the world where things are being made, are being manufactured. And I'd like to remind you that Lombardy during pandemic was actually having problem in manufacturing face masks because actually face masks are being produced elsewhere. And so bringing back manufacturing to cities, it means a very different, unique, digital and sustainable manufacturing. So having a different approach when it comes to repair things and bring it back to local again. So try to imagine cities as the places where we locally produce what we use, what we consume. The very first time I came across this vision, I said, this is really transformative. This is the most transformative things I've heard of. And then bullet point number 3. So, of course, this strategy as an advantage. If we produce and repair and maintain locally, then it means that we will be more hands-on and we will definitely start the so-called circular economy. So waste and remains are going to be used as raw materials, and we'll kind of close the loop like this. So looking at cities has a huge mine of raw materials that we can pull out from. So the bet here in this project is truly radical. So we are now approaching this new vision of circular economy, not only within cities, but also in the very city where we live, and that's why we're so happy. We're today welcoming Councillor Cristina Tajani here. Another piece of good news is that this is not a single initiative, so it's not just us. There is an international movement actually crowding 35 cities and regions from all over the world. They're being listed in the slide, and the movement is called the Fab City Global Initiative, and it is an initiative that will make use of new technology, new digital technologies to reach out to this self-sufficiency manufacturing date by 2054. Now, this sounds very much science fiction, but actually it looks like science fiction. They really get it right when they forecast. So why shouldn't we do it also? Perhaps start considering that as a goal, as a target for us to look at. So this very movement was born in Barcelona, was being established in Barcelona. It's been promoted by the first Fab Lab in Europe, and Milan municipality worked on that a lot, and this is why it comes so natural for us now to kind of raise the bar when it comes to our ambitions. So this initiative was established in 2014 following an idea of the mayor in Barcelona, and it's currently being supported by a number of municipalities, including Paris. This picture was actually taken in Paris, 2018. Milan municipality was there as well, and we do know that some Fab City Paris representatives are attending also. A big round of applause, actually. So welcome. So one last thing that I have to say is that this project, this initiative, are now being embedded in this journey started in 2017, Manifatture Milano. The slide is actually the one that I was showing before, and that is the Milan Municipality Initiative, fully devoted and it speaks about this initiative being embraced by Milan, including 200 enterprises in the city, and perhaps you have been already engaged as either enterprises or people. So we were organizing in 2018-19 an open day called Manifatture Aperte. Unfortunately, we could not hold it in 2020 for obvious reasons, but actually Manifatture, as well as a Centrino project, is part of a very long journey. Okay, I'll now let the floor to Zoe Romano. She will tell us more about the project. Thank you.
Mi vibra ma non parte. Indietro. Ok, perfetto, grazie.
Thank you. I am excited that I'm speaking on site. It's been over 1.5 years. I haven't done it. So I have to say that, well, you've heard from Annibale. He has told you, has shared with you this experience that we started with Manifatture Milano over the last 3 years, and Progetto Centrino being fitted in this project. But actually, it started way earlier. Actually, Centrino, being established in collaboration with NEMA, actually started some 2 years ago. And actually, when it comes to European project, you know, it takes time for us to get funding, to start pilot, and in this particular case, this was already included in Fab Lab Europe-wide. So that is something that we've been part of for years now. Centrino project means to produce a circular economy according to the model Fab City you've heard of, and you will be hearing even more from Thomas Diaz. So what's interesting here is that the project focuses on former industrial areas. So usually industrial areas are not being positioned in the city centers, and so we decided not to focus on city centers, but more on the former industrial areas where industrial manufacturing was happening. And in this particular case, the project is involving 25 partners, and the Horizon 2020 project, they tend to include a similar number of partners. And over the next 3 years, we will develop some pilot, some experimental projects. We'll engage stakeholders from local areas, and the interesting thing is that there's nothing planned. We will make it work all together. We will trigger and make it work all together. The other 9 cities which are on the slide, they're all focusing on specific topics. We've chosen design and fashion, and that is because Fab Lab and Makerspace in Milan, they are working in those domains already. So we've had a prior experience 3 years ago, and we were engaging design and fashion enterprises mainly. So, on the one side, we will, let's say, conduct activities, common activities with other cities, and there will be then perhaps some benchmarking. We will map, we will see how things are going elsewhere, and how a Fab City hub can be organized, because of course the different stakeholders will possibly have different needs. So the bottom line is that we want to create a physical, digital space. We don't want to be trapped by the physical space only. We know that digital spaces have become as important as physical. We will focus on fashion and design, and we want to engage communities and enterprises trying to understand what training we need, what infrastructures we need, and what kind of conversation we need to have with citizens and municipality. Otherwise, we won't go anywhere. We need to triangulate all of the different stakeholders, and this is something we've learned over the years. Next. So supporting partners, official ones, are Milan Municipality and NEMA. NEMA might sound new to some of you, and NEMA is a network of enterprises, and I do coordinate a project within NEMA along with the Cariplo Factory, Cube Base, this very space, this very venue you're in, opened up, and Fab Lab Milano. So we will be headquartered in Base, here in Milan, but of course in the close future, we might have a diffused traveling Fab City lab. So we're still very open to this. For the time being, we will be headquartered in Base because it is actually based, let's say, in a formal industrial area. So it really stands out for the project.
Benissimo, in questo momento noi siamo nel primo sprint, il progetto, il pilota in 3 anni sarà fatto
right now we are experiencing sprint number 1. We've decided to call it like that. So let's say the first race, the first sprint will be about research and support. So we will be in contact with stakeholders, and we will speak to those people, citizens, who want to be part of that. During sprint number 2, so year number 2, we will prototype services that might be useful in a Fab City hub, and then sprint 3 for governance. So how do we manage, how do we support it, how do we make it work so that we can work better and we can bring forward our new vision of the next city.
Non ci resta che, diciamo, dare la parola.
So I will now leave the floor to Thomas Diaz. He will tell us about the vision of Fab City. So welcome you all, and hopefully we will be able during the roundtable to develop some interesting ideas to work on. Thank you.
Grazie Zoe, grazie Annibale di questa introduzione e della presentazione del progetto.
For this very interesting introduction, thank you for introducing the project and welcome you all. And of course, welcome to Thomas Diaz. We are happy and honored. He will be speaking from Barcelona. And now the magic comes. Uwe Plana, the founder of the first Fab Lab in Milan, as well as the Fab City Global Initiative. His experience was very much into digital manufacturing, as well as his background as a urban planner has made it possible for him to explore the relationship between the two. So how digital production, the digital manufacturing, and the entire mindset behind it, what kind of conversation does he have with the city, with the urban? So,
can you hear me?
Now you can't interact.
Ok. Lascio la parola a Thomas.
Yes, I can hear you. Thank you.
Welcome, Thomas. A round of applause.
More or less.
Okay, and I speak now because I cannot hear myself.
I can hear you, and we are very happy and proud to have you here with us. So I hope that now you can hear yourself, we can hear you.
Guarda me. Dai la parola.
And please, the floor is yours.
Okay, Constantino, can I go? Okay, fantastic. Thank you very much for the amazing introduction. The first thing I have to say is that I don't consider myself the unique founder of Fab City. I have to say that this is a shared effort coming from many hours, trips, kilometers, meetings, brain power of many people, part of the Fab City collective. Some of them are in Milano right now, and I have to say that this is a collective effort. The second thing is I'm really sorry for not being there in Atoms and just being able to be in Beats. I just arrived on Sunday from Indonesia, and then here in Barcelona we're having the end of the year presentations of our students here in our lab. And the third thing before I can share with you some ideas and some slides is that many thanks for inviting me to be part of this launching of the Centrino pilot in Milano and the Fab City camp. It's just amazing to share the stage with people like Cristina, Zoe, Anibale, Enzo. I mean, what can I say? It's just fantastic. Thank you very much. I have to say that the honor is completely mine. So I want to show you some slides. I find fascinating that the presentation that Anibali did, and also Zoe, because I can jump some of the things I usually have to share and go straight into some ideas that I think like I add to the conversation and add to these next steps on how we're going to make this happen, right? Like how we are going to implement the vision of Hub City. And let me go quickly through the slides very shortly at the beginning. No? So I want to introduce you to the Fab City Strategic Action Plan. And this is an evolution of what we have been calling until now the Fab City Full Stack. Some of you are going to be familiar with that, but let me go into some of the framing. No? You know, as Anibali said, you know, cities want to reinvent their urban model. We want to really make a revision on where things come from, the things that we consume, and how cities are depending on these global supply chains. I cannot find a better fit between what Anibali was saying and what, you know, the claims that we have in Fab City. As you can see, we share a vision and we share the same concerns because, you know, behind of all of chains, of the supply chains, and also the chains behind our production system, there are, you know, extreme impactful results in the environment, as we have seen, and also in the social configuration of our cities, of our regions, and of our countries. So Fab City is introducing a way in which we can, you know, at least start to create some, not only think, but also create some actions in which we can create a new productive model. It sounds like a very naive question, but it's also based on many years of work. Imagine we launched Hub City for the first time in 2011. We launched the global pledge from Barcelona in 2014. And most of the people that is in the room, or some of the people that is in the room, we have been building relationships for years, for many years. So this is not just an idea or some kind of theory. And then during these years, we have been able to consolidate three things, I believe, within the whole Fab City Global Initiative. One is the collective, which I was telling you before, is the people that, individuals that have devoted time, effort, passion in order to start their own Fab City chapters, in order to contribute to the global knowledge of Fab City, or being part right now of the Fab City movement very centrally. The Fab City network, which is 38 cities. It's not only 34, it's 38. We are also welcoming another, I think it's going to be between 4 and 6 cities this year in the Fab City Summit in August. And finally, one of the most recent news is that we started the Fab City Foundation based in Estonia, which officially started in early 2020. And that now we are, infrastructuring is going to be the organization that is going to support, or it's already supporting, some of the global Fab City efforts. So the way in which we see Fab City unfolding into a specific action in cities, and not only the vision, no? We understand that we need to reconfigure supply chains. We understand the potential of digital technologies, but the question is, how we're going to make this happen. This is something that we had been asking ourselves again and again, in order not to stay just into these claims on, we have to move from centralized to distributed models of production, follow the internet model, but bring it to the production model, and so on and so on. But really thinking about what cities need to implement this, and also how we can organize inside the Fab City Global Initiative our own research and innovation agenda, right? So on one hand, we have this transformation of the whole model from centralized to distributed. And also we understand that at the bioregional level, not only the city, but even the natural systems that are made possible for the cities and other human settlements to exist, there are a series of things that they need to be operating in order to supply what humans need without compromising the life of other species. So we have been translating this into a specific action plan through the full stack model. The full stack comes from a terminology applied especially in software development. It's very IT. So it means like all the layers needed in order to, for instance, to serve a website. No, it's not only the front end, but it's also the back end and also the servers. So it creates the different layers that makes possible for you to access to a website. No? So we kind of translated that concept into the full stack and understanding all the layers that are needed in order to make possible for cities to reconfigure their productive model. So we initially called it the full stack for these reasons. Then we were shifting to the strata, following the more like a geological layers of formation. But then we basically think like a more straightforward name and more straightforward terminology is to develop a strategic plan. It sounds very, cliche and very old-fashioned. But at the end of the day, what we need now is not to create more complex terminologies, but start to go directly into actions. So in the next couple of minutes, I want to share with you how we unpack these layers. No? So this is how we see it is that these different layers, they are not linear. The relationship is not linear. It's not that you start from one side or the other. It's not top down. It's bottom up. It's actually a combination of both. These are layers that when you connect them, you basically are adding more ingredients in order for the local capacity of a city is increased and also in its region without losing the connection with its the global scale. No? So let me show you the different layers in detail. We start from the bottom. In this case, what we're introducing is the idea that we really need to think about the kind of infrastructure for distributed production. If you look at the last 200 years, we have been building infrastructure to move things around the world. So we have invested a lot on making highways, ports, the best airplanes, the bigger ships that get stuck into canals, and also the best technologies in order to navigate around the world because we need to transport things, right? And then when you look at some examples of this distributed production, of course, we have to mention Fab Labs. This is the infrastructure that we have been developing for the last 20 years, more or less. And right now, there are 2,000 Fab Labs around the world that can show us, like, okay, what is this type of new infrastructure that we need in order to make production distributed? Because right now, I can send to Constantino, Zoe, or Enrico a design that I made here, and they can make it in their own lab locally in Milano. Then other cities have been taking it into another approach. For instance, the city of Sao Paulo, under municipal action, they have developed 12 Fab Labs located in different neighborhoods in the city, which is part of this new infrastructure connected to digital production. But in this case, they are not factories. They are places in which people learn about these technologies and these tools, and they apply it to what they need. No? Of course, in complement with this kind of idea of Fab Labs, which is a micro-scale prototyping learning, we need to think about other type of large-scale infrastructure, which could be flexible factories or material libraries, as Paris is doing in the district of Saint-Denis, for instance. No? So there is rethinking the infrastructure that we need for global production. Then it's fundamental to think about the skills that are needed in order to introduce this mindset into companies, but also the type of capacities that the new workforce needs in order to be part of a distributed production model. So we go from the idea of having operators of machines to have people that can be creators of technologies, or people that can have like a more flexible skills, more dynamic skills that can adapt to the needs of the ever-changing problems that are happening in the city. So this starts from the very young kids. And it's not only about fabrication, but it's also about introducing biomaterials, introducing artificial intelligence learning into high schools, into elementary schools. And more importantly, is introducing the critical and creative thinking in schools. So people, kids are not part of like a sausage machine, but actually they are starting to use technology and the potential of technology in a creative way, but also being critical of what they are doing. No? And this doesn't need to happen only at master levels and at very advanced levels. We believe also that vocational training, which is something that we are evolving within Centrino very strongly, needs to be rethink, and that's something that we're prototyping in the different pilots happening within the project. And then within the Fab Lab network, we have been developing the Fab Academy since 2009, which is a distributed educational program. And then on top of that program, or on top of that infrastructure, like the Fab Labs, we have the capacity to create more programs. And in the case of Fab City, we are now developing a distributed innovation program that is going to come soon. So once you have the capacities at the local scale to develop or the new skills acquired at the local scales, then you have the potential to create new, projects that are out of the box, and they start to challenge the status quo. No? So we need to support the incubation and acceleration of these projects that are not looking to become a startup and being sold for millions of dollars following the Silicon Valley model, but actually startups that are based on impact, that are based on replicability at the global scale, they are open source, and they are adding value to the local ecosystems. These are some examples that we have been developing in Barcelona that go from creative musical instruments to open source beehives to sensors to measure the pollution in the city. Then one of the things that we learned, especially with the Smart Citizen project, is that technology is not enough. So you need to really think about where are these technologies useful and for whom. No? So usually inside Fab Labs, where I think traditionally we have been very technology oriented. This is something that I think is changing. But we kind of experienced that with Smart Citizen. We say, okay, of course, everybody's going to love a white sensor board. No? And it was not the case. We realized that we needed to change our strategy in order to work with the local communities and also introduce technologies in a complete different way that we would imagine. No, we have people that never, they didn't know what a browser was, for instance. Or when I'm talking about Barcelona, here in Paseo de Gracia, in La Plaza del Sol in Gracia, where we did a great intervention with the Smart Citizen, or, for instance, the work that we have been doing in the Poblenou neighborhood by introducing this idea that the whole neighborhood could be a Fab City prototype where we can experiment and test different Fab City technologies. And, we still have those challenges that at the end, some of the neighborhood inhabitants, they see it as like a bunch of hipsters that are playing with machines using meaningless things. But at the same time, I think in the other hand, we are starting to create evidence. Just recently, through the Cisco project, the Remix El Barrio project that we did here in the Poblenou, in which we were using waste from restaurants and from other sources here in the barrio to create or to support initiatives that are creating startups based on biomaterials and circular economy, was recognized by the Starts Prize of Ars Electronica this year. No? And of course, the example of Paris at that scale, in which we introduces this idea that what happens in terms of Fab City or the impact of a Fab Lab should go beyond the walls or the limits of a space itself. In this case, Francesco maybe is what you can ask him, or I think he's going to be introducing that later, on what are the things that they are doing in Paris, and also the amazing work on the Fab City Hub there in Paris. That again is that work that has been happening during years, and especially the articulation of the local players through the Fab City Association and all these efforts. Another larger scale strategies, like I'm thinking about the more territorial approach, is in Seoul in Korea, where the team has developed a Fab City cooperative. So there is a Fab City cooperative in Seoul, and they're working on the development of another infrastructure that is needed in the city, which is the microfactories. So the next layer that we believe is fundamental is also, this one territorial scale, but it's also, we need to think about the people and how those people connect and those communities connect at cities and regions. No? So that's the next layer in which, whatever we are doing, it's not enough to have like a technical check, and also like from the urban planner perspective, this very top-down approach, say, okay, this is what it needs to be done, but we really need to work with, right? And not work for only, but work with communities. And that's some of the approaches that, we try to combine. Of course, you start with an idea, you push, you get the feedback from the community or the rejection, and then you push back, and it's kind of a dialogue that needs to exist, and we see fundamental in order to make these efforts. No? And then in Barcelona, I see one clear example. We have been fighting, as I told you, at the local level in the neighborhood, but also with the city council and it's very difficult sometimes to work with administrations. You are lucky in Milano because I have been having the opportunity to work also with the Comune de Milano, being the coordinators of Centrino, doing an excellent job and understanding and pushing and also creating the conditions for things to happen. While, in some cases, we have been also pushing and having these struggles of power in other cities and in Barcelona for sure in the past. No? So another example of working with communities is what we developed together with IKEA and brought the community of makers and designers in Pobleno and also from internationally and some designers from IKEA Sweden, and together with the Fab Lab community, we tried to create the conditions. And this actually was the starting point of the Fab City prototype, thanks to a collaboration that we did with Space 10, which is the IKEA Innovation Lab in Copenhagen. But it's this idea of creating the opportunity for people to meet and do something together. Not just to meet and have, but do something. How we can enable projects that align multiple actors into shared purposes. Then finally, the two layers. One is key, is what is recently added into this idea of the strategic action plan, is that the city that we would like to put boundaries is actually is a very complex system, as you know, and has a bioregional dimension as well. No, the city is depending highly on water coming from the closest bioregion, the watersheds that are part of that bioregion, and in some cases food. I know that's the case of Milano, but also that it's understanding that cities are organisms that are artificial. They have humans, but they also participate in another community of organisms that is other species and other natural systems. And in this scale of the bioregion, there are multiple opportunities. Now, one is, of course, identifying the work with multiple species, the conservation, the treatment of the supplies that we need for cities, and taking them with care and not with exploitation. But also it's understanding that there is infrastructure, as I was talking at the beginning, that could operate at that level. No, this is the example of one of the small projects that we're doing as well within Centrino, which is the development of the kind of a cartography which allow us to identify which are the manufacturing capacity of a city, and this is part of a MakeWorks project that we have been developing not only from Fab Lab Barcelona, but also in collaboration with other European projects. And then I'd like to show this example, which is a little bit tangential to Fab City, but it's this idea of working with islands. No? And this is a beautiful work developed by a team from Greece, Belgium, multiple nations, and then they work on. They are called usually metabolism of cities, but they are also working on metabolism of islands, right? So finally, and I think that brings to this kind of a whole concept of Fab City is the kind of a Dido, no? Like all these efforts that are happening at the local scale are also meaningful when we scale them down, scaling up to the global level, right? So the way of doing this is sharing global repositories of course, of the recipes of how things are done. And so Smart Citizen is open source, for instance, or aquaponic systems that are designed anywhere and can be made anywhere. Also, not only the designs of objects or tools or technologies, but also the methodologies. I was saying before, like how we approach to work with communities, with local ecosystems, et cetera, and the metrics that we need to develop at the global level in order to measure progress and being able to say if we are going into the right direction or not. So all these layers that I've been introducing, and of course at the global level, the Fab Lab network and the Fab City network, all these layers, as I have been mentioning, they help us to understand how we unpack this big challenge to move from the product in, trash out, to data in, data out, to put it in this unpack, this like a more granular, giving more granularity to the challenge. And even like when you work in a project or in a strategy, you can even assign almost like a budget. You can develop like a budget, and then they say I'm going to assign this to infrastructure, I'm going to assign this to training, I'm going to assign this to strategies. I'm going to assign this to develop digital platforms. So it's to give you an idea on how we see this becoming a tool for cities to be able to organize their local efforts. As I said before, this doesn't have a linear, it doesn't need to go from bottom to top or from top to down. It can go into multiple directions. I have been trying to illustrate here. And it goes together with some tools and some methods that we're going to be showing. We have introduced it in the Centrino project, but also we're going to be showing in the Fab City Summit next summer. So with this, I have to say, thank you very much. I know that unfortunately we won't have time to talk today. I would love to be there again. I feel honored to be sharing stage, as I said before, with people that is in the room. I pass it over to you in Milano, Cristina and Ezio. I would love to be there. I think I misspelled your name at the beginning, Ezio. I'm so sorry, but thank you very much. I love you, everyone, and I hope to see you soon with a beer in the hand. Bye bye.
So this is an applause for you. Thank you very much. Ciao ciao.
Grazie Thomas, è stato bello avere la tua presenza anche così virtuale, anche per farci vedere che anche quando siamo, diciamo, nel nostro piccolo possiamo essere connessi. Forse la pandemia ci ha dimostrato questo elemento in un modo più forte che mai. Alcuni materiali che vedete qui e che abbiamo condiviso oggi li troverete anche sul nostro sito manifattura.milano.it, che sarà un po' il nostro spazio virtuale di scambio, di interazione. Avrete informazioni su tutti voi presenti qua
and therefore we will be able to have a conversation on that, and you may, let's say, also follow through this very event again from
Thomas
scratch.
ha dato proprio una visione di cosa possono fare le città anche a livello globale,
a very great overview of what cities can do, but starting from a very small scale, local scale. I think this allows me to introduce the next conversation, the conversation between Ezio and Cristina. So Ezio Manzini, professor, and Councillor Cristina Tajani.
Avete i microfoni là. Benvenuti. Grazie per essere qui con noi.
Welcome and thank you so much for being with us this afternoon. Cristina Tajani, Councillor at the Municipality of Milan, Production Activities, Human Resources, and she is very well known for developing enabling politics and policies which allow people to be included. Ezio Manzini, one of the great researchers of social inclusion and design, he's a visionary on these topics, and is always able, let's say, to look far and beyond. So Cristina and Ezio, you have both written books recently, and you have also made, let's say, some observations around what happened during the pandemic. You've written books around the proximity, città prossime, and prossimità. Those are the two titles of the two books, which I have been so much pleased to read. So we organized this conversation here. And the goal is very much to speak through this idea of proximity in cities as well as manufacturing. And it means to be a very easy conversation. So I will ask perhaps some comments to start with, and perhaps if you can be short in your speech so that we can all appreciate a conversation
nel
between the
libro,
two.
Ezio,
So,
tu
Ezio,
descrivi
in
come,
your book,
la prossimità
you
in città non è solo
describe
questione
how
di 15
proximity
minuti,
in
non è solo
city
questione
is
di
not
avere vicini
just
alcuni
about
servizi, ma che è molto
being,
di più, no?
being
La prossimità
having
legata,
everything walking
alle
distance,
relazioni,
but it is
legata
a
alle
proximity
comunità.
associated
E
to
questo credo
relations,
che sia
to people, to
una
communities.
questione importante,
And
anche
I
perché la
think
dimensione
this
stessa
is
dei
very
15 minuti già
important,
vediamo
because
viene ogni
even
tanto
if we
criticata,
say
qualcuno
having everything at 15 minutes distance, well, that is something that is not very well understood, because people may walk, they may either go on a bicycle, and so on.
al pubblico nostro, che è
So
un pubblico
actually,
di tutte persone che già sono attivi
the
nel
audience
campo di
here,
design, moda,
they're all
sostenibile,
very
circolare,
active and
un po' una
engaged in the
visione
circular
di come
economy and design. So
la
what I'm asking you
fabbricazione, di come
to
la
do,
produzione
Ezio, is to
trova
tell us
spazio in
how
questa idea
manufacturing
di
and
prossimità, di
production
città in
may
cui esiste
embrace
vicinanza
this
tra
idea
persone,
of
proprio a
proximity.
partire dal micro.
Certo. Allora, grazie a tutti.
Well, thank you all, first of all, and I will try in 5 minutes to provide some answer and perhaps also raise some insights. I was hoping I could wear a jacket, but
Questo libro
now, this book I wrote is a contribution to an ongoing debate. This ongoing debate means to describe the city and means to say, okay, you will find everything in the city that you need very not too far away from you. And actually, that is very functional, of course. So having a city where you are close, where you have proximity to services, well, that is what I started from. And actually, I realized that many of us are using proximity. Well, proximity is a very powerful terminology. On one side, it means physical proximity, but it's also human proximity, and that means empathy, ability to listen, ability to take care, to be taken care of. So I try to speak through this relationship. And because relational proximity, so going from solitude, from isolation to empathy, so that proximity cannot be designed. How can you possibly design human proximity? Well, thank goodness it cannot be designed, but you can set conditions for that to become possible. And this is why I like to speak about functional proximity. Functional, it means that people, as they're doing many different things throughout the day, well, it may sound banal, but it's not. Well, actually, as they do something, they might have this opportunity to meet up with others and maybe even to start to do things together. And this is the content of my book. But I'd love to spend a few words around the production aspect. So the book goes through that also, but not too much. So I do fully agree with Annibale when he said, the first time I came across a person saying that the city of the future might be a city of the manufacturing, well, I found that to be transformative. Then I was not engaged on that because I cope with services more. I take care of services more. But that, I thought, was an extraordinary idea that should be pursued. And now, after pondering on proximity, I have started to consider that, and I have wondered how I've wondered how can we also embed the city of manufacturing, of production. So when you consider that kind of city, we don't have to think about a past or the manufacturing from the past, because manufacturing was there. Perhaps I do still remember those Chinese, those groups of Chinese working in a kind of a factory in the city, and that was still happening in the city. And these are things that, unfortunately, is a very bad example, negative example, but that is manufacturing in the city. We are not obviously talking through that negative example, but we are now considering the circular production.
Della manifattura bisogna vedere che cosa sono le manifatture.
What do we mean by manufacturing? Well, at times, when we speak through Fab Lab, we say they do things. Well, but perhaps this should be the great opportunity when we say Fab Lab are not just doing things, generally speaking, but they may perhaps specify exactly what they do. For instance, the upcycling, the recycling, that means to reconsider the manufacturing capability to extend the life of products and to consider reuse, which is really changing the rules of the game. So you don't have to take it as a minor thing, but you literally capsizing, you're completely changing the paradigm, and it will be more about reusing rather than wasting. So this is what we mean by producing, manufacturing, extending life through recycling, and trying to consider that from a very different perspective. And this is what I call the functional. What is the relational aspect? Well, I have exceeded my time. I will just tell you about the title, and then I will perhaps deep dive further on. Something else that is often not spoken through is the quality. So what is the quality of the things we make? How can we have the sense and the value of what we do?
C'è di eccitazione sul fatto che ho fatto delle cose, facciamo le strane con il digitale.
Often we believe and we assign, we allocate value to design, but we neglect the full process.
Quel bellissimo libro di Richard Sennett che si chiama L'uomo artigiano.
Well, I would like to remind you an important book and recommend reading The Craftsman, Uomo Artigiano, because that is where quality makes sense. So the quality craftsman is not just the traditional craftsman, but that is about aiming for quality in what you craft. And this is what the writer says. And this may apply to a number of feasible things, not just in traditional craftsmanship. So I think we should tackle quality. And what is the value of quality? Because it is not just about let's say, speaking through what is being manufactured, but also the quality of what is being produced. And actually, quality and the way of working should always be at stake, should always be considered. Quality in a circular economy does not have to do only with finished product, but also have to do with the relational aspects of that, including communities. And I think that this very idea of the quality of what you do and what it's been generated by it is what become truly an important element of the strategy we heard of.
Non lo so, ma è stato perfetto. Grazie mille. E su questo tema della qualità della produzione, che non è solo del prodotto,
through quality of product, but not only of product, of process, of workers, of communities. Well, I'd love to now introduce Cristina and ask her. You devote a full chapter to manufacturing, and you are concluding that saying that let's say the quality we aim at also has to do with valuable relations. Now, how about the city of Milan? Milan has an important relationship with manufacturing. We are in Base, and Base is a symbol, actually, is a great symbol for manufacturing. It was a former industrial area, then it's been neglected, and nowadays it is representing rebirth. So manufacturing for Milan is important. And again, considering the audience, what is the role of production in Milan, meaning that it has to be sustainable and inclusive? Thank you, Ezio. Thank you, Liad, for having accepted this invite, because of course I work for the municipality, and started from 2016 we have started to consider the project Manifatture Milano. The name of the project says it all, and many of the partners are attending today. And let's say that we have developed a number of reasonings and actions whose objective was to consider Milan as a city that has a former manufacturing past, like it has been the case of many cities during the economic boom, and that over the last decades, ever since Ansaldo abandoned these industrial areas, and so ever since then, let's say, we have been very used to consider Milan as a city of services, of flows, something that was not material, and that brings, of course, pros and cons. So what we have tried to do instead is actually to adopt and foster new policies that, because we want Milan to be back to its former state of a manufacturing city. Indeed, we realize that when it comes to urban areas, it is absolutely possible to consider that. This is a trend. It is not just happening in Italy or in Milan, it is also happening elsewhere. And this is something that it might be also very useful, not only because we manufacture and produce, but also we we have this objective of re-qualified neglected areas, abandoned areas, and not being abandoned by factories that left 40 years ago, but actually also considering trading. Trading is changing also. In many urban areas, the, let's say, dismissed areas are those that are now welcoming shopping centers. And there has been a moment in the 80s and 90s where around cities, actually, they meant to, let's say, devote a certain type of trading, of retailing activities, such as shopping centers and so on. Now there is a growing trend, and actually we are observing this changing, we are embracing this changing, and this is something that as a public institution we mean to tackle. So of course, the objective is to be able to re-qualify areas, being very careful and fully devoted to recycling, reuse, extended life of products, and that has become part of our reasoning as well. And we have started to endorse some important activities, such as a Fat Lab, for instance. And also we have started to network along with stakeholders on the territories, a number of initiatives. We have promoted some communication-based initiatives, such as the event of Manifatture Aperte, which was held twice in 2 years, and then it's been discontinued because of the pandemic. Nowadays, we can only tell that we were welcoming some of these insights and have embraced them to the point that they are now part of our rethinking of our far too extended supply chains. And I would like to remind you what Annibale said at the very beginning today. So, of course, there has been an historical moment where the value chain was kind of becoming way too long because it appeared to be important for competition, whereas we understood that it is not the case. So the trend and very much to shorten value chain as much as possible, because of course this is what we are now aiming at. The project Manifattura Milano is really being is a really good example of how we can shorten these value chains, and I think there are some key advantages in that. And actually, it's not by chance that both myself and Ezio have written 2 books around this very topic. We both embrace this idea of the relational, of the value of relationship. And actually, the reason why we're all crowded and gathered here has the very objective to develop some relations. And as we are doing so through a network of Fab Lab, which we call Fab City, and this is something that, of course, we will have to further connect to other players and stakeholders. One of the key topics nowadays is very much the crisis of raw materials. It's been many decades that actually we were not running short of raw materials. I think that was perhaps happening during the oil crisis back in the 70s. And now automotive factories are suspending activities because they lack, they are suffering shortage of raw materials. So that tells us a lot of how important it is to reuse materials, to extend life of items. This is not frills, you know. This is a key aspect that the whole of the manufacturing system has to take into consideration. And so this is, of course, something that this is the reason why we're so very happy to make this step forward through this project and through these practices. Thank you. Thank you so much, Cristina.
Ezio, ti lascerei un commento su quello che
Ezio, one comment on what Cristina said. Well, she said this project is an opportunity of creating something together that goes into this direction, and that is a mandatory direction. So we shall consider the economic and social sustainability. The word sustainability should not even be there anymore, because it should all be sustainable. So there's this great opportunity of exchanging amongst the cities. So Ezio, if you can tell us some tips perhaps on how to take advantage this opportunity, and what are the key items that we should keep in mind when we do this for the city of Milan?
Sì, io vorrei fare un passettino avanti in una cosa che avevo accennato già prima.
Actually, I would love to reconnect to what I quickly mentioned before. When we said that we have to do something, saying clearly and upfront what we're doing. And this is not criticism against what has been said, but if we say that we should treat waste and that we should take upcycle of waste seriously, yeah, that is indeed something that we need to do. Perhaps this is not the best thing to do in a city. So people perhaps are wondering, what are we talking about? Because you perhaps consider having a flower pot from a glass bottle. You can do it in your house, but you will not fix the problem of waste, because we do actually waste some 3 billion bottles every day. So we should come up with the 3 billion flower pot. So what is this treatment of waste? What are we talking about? If we say extending life, repairing, so let's start from what it is possible to do. And indeed, we are now seeing in the city, we are repairing, we are doing this and that in a city, but Still, we have to consider that there's more to it. There's more to talking. So there should be some clear examples, and also being able to bring it to a larger scale. So let's consider the low-hanging fruits, what is easiest to do, and start doing it and giving a name. The second thing I'd love to say, and this came to my mind as you were talking, so it may sound dull, I hope it's not. So what are Fab Lab doing? Now, again, I don't want to do any criticism again, but what are they doing? What do they do? Why do we say that they're doing something useful? And so this is amongst the things they do. They should be promoters and supporters of actions of others. So the entire production system should be, let's say, started. So it should be a kind of a new value chain. And also trying to solve some of these issues that have been perhaps unacceptable from a social standpoint. If you take the Chinese stuck in large factories working. So Milano Manifatture is a project that I absolutely loved because it was looking at what was there and then it was processing, it was elaborating on that, and it was being inspired by that work, trying to see how to valorize their work. But so it's not. There's more also. This is not only value craftsmanship. So perhaps these Fab Labs, they may map the neighborhoods and it was coming to my mind, and now I will come to conclusions. Well, right now I'm engaged in the healthcare services. There's a law speaking through the House of Health, and they call them the houses of communities, and that is associated. That it's being associated to the house for large communities, and we do not have one in Lombardy, but there are few in Tuscany, for instance. We call it the House of Health. Now, if we were making the House of Health, but we apply it to things, to items, to products, so as opposed to only having a production and then dealing with production on one side and waste and rubbish on the other side, well, same as it happens for the House of Health, where we do not just repair people who are sick, but let's say we're also having the combination of many different things happening. So, of course, this would mean a change in mindset. And the change in mindset does not just happen overnight. So that is very important to me. And even the houses of health is not just health related and social, but it's also about creating an entire community around the topic of health. So all the relevant stakeholders who are interested into that topic then should really engage on board all the different players, and so that society can actually embrace this all. So I came up with this 5 minutes ago. I hope it works. Well, as a designer, of course, you can be very creative in 5 minutes. And by the way, we are soon be working around co-design ideas. So actually, starting from this short conversation here, we're going to be asking people, what would you like to do? What can we do together so that we actually embrace and approach a new mindset in Milan? And Cristina, then my question is, what do you expect for Milan from this group of people and from this project? Well, actually, as it is often the case, the best choices we made are coming from some core design example. And actually, this is because perhaps we were setting some criteria at the beginning, and then we were welcoming feedbacks from the community, and we were elaborating on that to deliver the result. So it's really interesting now that we have this European project ongoing that allow us to work as some sort of as a think tank. And I think this is already a beautiful opportunity. And perhaps if you were asking me to identify a priority for Milan, for the city which is now trying to design the future, is that the opportunity we have now is that to reconnect and reconnect the city center with the outskirts. The economic development of Milan over the last century has been nourished of what has happened in the surroundings. So starting from the outskirts in the northern part of the city, which became industrialized heavily between the end of 1800 and beginning of 1900 through fabrics and then the iron industry. So it has becoming richer and richer starting from the northern part. For instance, in the Brianza area, in the outskirts, we still have a plethora of furniture makers and a lot of craftsmanship in that area. And that dates back to a long dated past. Or if we consider farming, for instance, I can mention Lodi and its surroundings. So let's say the thinking here is that we will have this ability to reconnect the city center with the production happening in the surroundings. And this is perhaps what Milan needs nowadays. So not only considering the city as the very center of it, but very much connecting the dots of what we have in the city center as well as elsewhere to reduce this gap. So it's not just about the city center skyrocketing and then who cares about the surroundings. So this is a connection that we really aim for, and I think it would be very interesting if as a public institution we were able to reconnect Milan with the production areas that surround the city center. Through these ideas of perhaps developing prototypes in the manufacturing aspect, So this is why I would like everybody to actually have this new idea. We will have a further exchange of considering both the manufacturers and what we do in the city. So thank you all who are now staying for the round table. But we are now saying goodbye to two people following us online. Thank you, Ezio. Thank you, Cristina. Thank you so much.
Costantino mi